Next up, Bret and Heather's excellent science adventure. On May 24th, Bret Weinstein boldly swallowed the anti-parasite drug ivermectin live on the Dark Horse podcast, as you do. I clipped a few choice moments for us from this piece of vaccine contrarian theater. But let me set the stage for you before we roll these. If you've never seen the Dark Horse podcast, Bret and his wife, Heather, sit in what almost looks like it might have been formerly a sauna, but now resembles the half kitchen of a holiday cabin in the woods rental they've converted into their studio. Every visible surface is made of the same light-colored wood, which contrasts quite beautifully with the black horsehead logo lit up in fluorescent yellow that sits between them on the screen, kind of mounted in a little nook under the wooden counter. They sit at a small round table, elbow to elbow, each with a sizable podcasting microphone in front of them.
We have to talk about the predicament that we are in on YouTube with respect to ivermectin, which is mentioned specifically in their community guidelines. YouTube has community guidelines.
You really want to start before you even say what the thing is?
It's like a radio play. It's so good.
Because we are scientists who are about to talk about scientific evidence. That scientific evidence may have implications for what we collectively ought to be doing and what you individually might think. We are not going to make any recommendations as to what you should do, and we are not going to say anything conclusive about what the data say because the data are not themselves conclusive. However, it doesn't mean the data don't imply things, and I think YouTube ought to think very carefully about whether it wants to confront two people who have the proper credentials, have demonstrated a willingness to be responsible about evaluating heterodox scientific processes, and in this case have just been through a circumstance where a hypothesis that they were suggesting needed to be investigated is now understood to be necessary to be investigated.
So convoluted,
in science. I feel endangered because we have not been vaccinated, because we have fears, as we have discussed at length on this podcast. I feel like I should be on it because as much as no drug is perfectly safe, I feel the danger of COVID in the world is much greater than the danger that comes from taking this stuff.
There's your argument for the vaccine, buddy.
Among other things, very cheap, but it doesn't have to be taken frequently. You take it 2 doses, 48 hours apart, and then I think it's weekly.
No.
That's just...
So how many? That looks like a large dose.
No, it's not. Well, okay. I'm splitting this because my dose and your dose these are 6 milligram.
No, let's see. Now he goes to get something to split, and he also gets safety goggles.
There is no telling. I want to use the same standard of safety that the AP uses. And the fact is, if I split one of these pills, anything could happen. It could explode into shards that could destroy frankly.
So for those listening at home, he's got safety glasses on now.
I have safety glasses on because...
You're looking at the world through safety colored glasses.
It's just so crazy. Like, this is why I call it vaccine contrarian theater. Like, let's get the glasses. Let's split this. It could explode. Anything could happen when I split this pill in half.
You're right. It does sound like one of those radio shows from the 30s.
Totally.
They definitely have that vibe.
So while it's usually used for infestations like head lice, scabies, and river blindness in humans, as well as worms and mites in dogs and horses, I think I'm seeing a connection here with the Dark Horse podcast. There's research showing that in vitro, so only in the lab, right? Not in actual live humans, ivermectin has some efficacy against SARS-CoV-2, but that's at very high doses. And the high dose required for an antiviral effect in humans is considered by the FDA to be toxic and is therefore not recommended. They also cite in a report that I'll include in the show notes that self-medication with ivermectin has led to hospitalization due to dangerous interactions with prescription medications that you've been told to take by a professional. On March 2nd, The Scientist magazine reported that a paper on ivermectin's use for COVID-19 that was provisionally accepted by the journal Frontiers in Pharmacology was later taken down. The reasons for its removal were that it included studies with insufficient statistical significance, as well as studies without control groups, and also that the paper inappropriately promoted the author's own ivermectin-based treatments. Now, of course, cries of censorship and conspiracy ensued, especially from one Pierre Corey and his organization, the FLCCC, who we will get to in a minute. Now, we covered, as I'm sure you guys remembered, the Bret and Heather's January appearance on Bill Maher's HBO show, where they raised their fears about the mRNA vaccines and wagered that AstraZeneca would be safer. And though, of course, all three are incredibly safe and effective, they got that prediction completely wrong, right? Because it was AstraZeneca that turned out to have the issues and not the mRNA vaccines. But we'll just keep going in true conspiracy theorist fashion. We'll throw out predictions, and the ones that don't land, we'll pretend we never said anything. They also spent some time on Bill Maher's show promoting their belief that COVID was created in the Wuhan lab. Now, this is super controversial and topical right now. The lab leak hypothesis has gained more traction in recent weeks. We'll see what the latest investigations show. Even Anthony Fauci, as early as this morning, was saying, we don't know. We need to keep looking at it. The consensus view amongst most scientists remains that the lab leak is significantly less likely than a zoonotic spillover.
I want to point out that right after that happened, the day that it was announced that the Biden administration was going to be looking into it, I had some vax hesitant and anti-vax people reach out to me saying, like, see,
smoking gun.
My reply was like, good, let them investigate. Yeah. I was always bothered by the WHO partnering with China. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with the investigation, but now that the way that it's happening, two things. First of all, conflating the lab leak hypothesis with anti-vaccination is what they're doing. And I don't understand how that's even possible, because they're two completely different things. And secondly, if the Biden administration, we already know that if they say, okay, you know what, it wasn't a lab leak, that the anti-vaxxers are going to be like, it's a conspiracy. Mm-hmm. It's a conspiracy. And then if they do actually find that it was, which we should be open to, that's what happens, then it's going to be used to further promote the anti-vax agenda. And this conflation of all of these things is really troublesome when you're thinking about public health.
Yeah, I recently have thought that it's kind of like the al dente conspiracy method, right? Where you throw as much pasta at the wall and see what sticks. And then when something sticks, you go, victory. See, I was right about everything, right?